Oh, we have deep philosophical conversations during the break, too. We get those in.
I tell you what, we ought to record those, and then that could be like a special podcast after the fact.
There could be teasers for
right.
after the
I am
podcast.
recording those, and I sell
I know.
that.
We could call it the nuzzle.
Pat can record us.
The nuzzle.
Uh-huh. Well, where are we going out there today, Morgan?
Ooh, I'll tell you what, have you guys heard there have been 2 pretty big assassination attempts in the past 3 or 4 months? Yeah, I know, Pat George. You hadn't heard of it, have you?
To who?
Well, the president.
Oh.
The president.
I'm not. No.
Yes.
April Fools.
No, I'm not kidding you. I'm not kidding you. In fact, there's one that we've been holding, which was a guy. I almost said gentleman, but I got to not use gentleman when we're talking about a terrorist.
I can't find anything about this.
Yeah, you won't. I know. And that's kind of, in and of itself, in my opinion, is a little out there. Mm-hmm. That none of the mainstream media is covering these assassination plots. Now, the first one was back in January, okay, and that was a guy from Georgia, from Cumming, Georgia. And he was basically going to go up and blow up buildings in Washington, D.C., including the White House and others. Okay, and he was stopped. But last week, and if you remember, if you watch the news a lot, which I happen to do, and I know you all do occasionally as well, but if you watch the news a lot last week, they were saying that now is the time we have to be somewhat concerned because with the end of the Mueller investigation and not being a positive outcome for people who are against President Trump, that we may see them kind of lose their minds a little bit and do some irrational things. I mean, that was some media messaging that came out last week, and I heard that repeatedly. Now, I don't know if that's actually the case or not. I mean, I suppose there is some sense to that. But here's example 1 of that phenomenon, supposedly. And this happened Wednesday of last week. And again, I don't think you guys heard about this, but this was over in West Virginia. There was a man driving on Interstate 68, and he was traveling at a very high rate of speed. It was about 130 miles per hour when he was spotted by the West Virginia trooper who pulled him over and then proceeded to ask him where he was going in such a hurry. And the gentleman, again, I shouldn't use that word, the guy, the man, his name was Eric Charon, 42 years old, of Kansas City, Missouri. He said he was going to have dinner with the president. Okay, so, and he was running a little bit late, thus the speed. Now, the trooper was able to ascertain from questioning him that he had been traveling for 13 hours straight without even so much as a bathroom break. He was hauling tail from Kansas City, Missouri, direct to Washington, D.C. Now, how did he know that President Trump had invited him to dinner, one might wonder? Well, never fear. The voices in his head told him so. And he also was then asked, did he have a firearm with him by the trooper? Yeah, he had a firearm. Any ammunition? Yeah, he had a little bit of ammunition. And how about, sir, do you have any explosives in the car with you? You know what his answer was? You got to love this answer. This is one that the trooper loves to hear, by the way. Not very much. I've only got a small amount for a bomb in the back.
Not very much.
Oh, me. Well, this guy's obviously got some real issues. One of them apparently being a pretty serious drug addiction, I'm guessing. And, of course, he admitted to this.
How old was this guy?
42 years old. 42 years old. Now, what's interesting is that he is, as I was reading the story, I was kind of going, this guy, but for this, what he did here, he could almost have been a guest on the Out There segment because he had apparently written some pretty crazy stuff in a little handwritten journal that he had that they found in the trunk, which talked about subjects ranging from time travel to levitation and mythical creatures such as the chupacabra. So I'm like, this guy, he's probably a very interesting dinner party guest. But for his severe methamphetamine addiction, which he does acknowledge that he's got a methamphetamine addiction that's out of control and has been for a couple of years now. And, there's some indication that could be some basis for some of the voices that he's hearing in his head, right? But, of course, I'm thinking back to some of our other out there segments, and I'm thinking about how we know that the technology's out there now. Mm-hmm. We know that the technology existed in the 70s for them to implant something into your sinus cavity that could make you hear voices in your head. Well, that's pretty difficult because that would involve a surgery and everything else. So, maybe somebody would know about that if you pulled that shenanigan on them. But then we've talked about how they've developed technology where they can actually make you hear sounds with electromagnetic radiation beamed at you. And they can make it to where it's specific to you where you're standing. Remember how we talked about that in the out there? So could they beam into your head and tell you, hey, President Trump's inviting you to dinner or something like that? I don't know. Probably not. Guys, probably just crazy. But as we begin to talk about these guys, I mean, the ones that really strike me as odd are the ones with a lot of mental issues and a lot of kind of strange thoughts. And then who wind up getting messages from somewhere, messages to go and do things. Another thing that strikes me as particularly strange about this particular guy is that, you know what his bond was? They set his bond at?
I bet very low.
$10,000.
That's really strange.
Are you kidding me?
I knew it.
The guy was on the way to go have dinner with the president, and he had a bomb and firearm and ammo, and you're setting his bail at $10,000? I mean, do you want him to get out? Do you want him to get out? Let's talk back about the man coming up from Georgia, because this was another plot that you didn't hear about, right? Now, this guy's name was Hasher Taheb. I'm going to give you a couple of guesses as to what his cultural religious persuasion was. And let's just say that his particular plot involved targeting the White House and other government buildings with a homemade bomb that he'd made, and also he had acquired an anti-tank rocket. I mean, where do you get one of those? I mean, that's not something you can get at the flea market, last time I checked. An anti-tank rocket? This guy's 21 years old, lives in Georgia, and his name's Hasher Taheb. Where's he buying an anti-tank rocket? Well, you know, when the FBI got a hold of him, they say he said he was headed to Hydra. And I wonder if you remember that, Hydra. No? Sort of, maybe? Well, in the article here, in the paper, it says that refers to Islamic State-controlled territory, and I suppose that that's right. But it also refers, if you remember, to a mosque in Falls Church, Virginia, called Dar al-Hijra, that we've talked about before. We've had guests on, including Chris Gobatz, who went undercover at that mosque back in, I think it was about 2007, and uncovered the fact that mosque is a front for the terrorist organization Hamas. So when you're talking about this guy was headed up from Georgia to Virginia, and he claims he's going to Hydra, and of course the FBI and the paper say, oh, that's Islamic State-controlled territory. Well, maybe it's the Dar al-Hijra Mosque in Falls Church. And that's a little out there. Folks, I'm Morgan Streetman, and that's the way I see it. Thank you for listening to the Morgan Streetman Show. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and if you did, please click like and subscribe to help us out. And remember that we recommend that you exercise your brain at least once a week.